We've already seen Radiant Virtue Varus popping off in recent patches, but there's another ADC who can abuse the tank item. On top of this, there's a bunch of mid-lane Viego players on the Korean server running with a super unique setup. So we've got some pretty spicy builds to cover in today's video, as we'll be breaking down 10 setups that are on the rise for 13.24b. But before we get into it, be sure to check out Skillcapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Rushing Duskblade on Aatrox has been around for a while now, but building full-out lethality has just started picking up traction in recent patches. In the past, when you build Duskblade, you generally go into Black Cleaver and then Serylda's Grudge, but it's now Edge of Night that is being prioritized over Black Cleaver. This new 2-item core of Duskblade into Edge of Night is being spammed by pros right now in solo queue. Something that a lot of people may not realize is that Edge of Night actually provides you with 325 health. It's a lethality item, so you wouldn't really think it would give you a ton of durability, but Edge of Night is the only lethality item that has health. You're still going to be less tanky than if you'd build Bruiser, but you're really not as squishy as you may expect. Edge of Night's passive, giving you the ability to block an enemy's spell, makes this build really great when you're trying to pull off ambush plays. The burst from the build is amazing, but at the same time you can block a key damage spell, which helps you win out in the 1v1. The standard rune page to run alongside this build is Conqueror with Triumph, Tenacity, and a Last Stand, followed by Second Wind and Revitalize for secondaries. There's been a new Hecarim build path catching steam over the past patch, and it's performing extremely well. Instead of rushing Spear of Shojin, which has been the meta for a while, Stridebreaker Rush is seeing a lot more play. The most common build for Hecarim right now also sees players building Black Cleaver, but this build slots in Serylda's Grudge as the third purchase. So the complete 3-item core looks like a Stridebreaker Rush into Spear of Shojin second and Serylda's Grudge third. Serylda's Grudge is actually quite an underrated third item on Hecarim right now, as you already get a bunch of health from Stride and Shojin, so going more offensive with Serylda's can work really well. If you're playing into a comp that you can burst out very quickly, it makes way more sense to prioritize Serylda's over Black Cleaver. The rune page you should be running with this build is Phase Rush, followed by Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, and Water Walking. Best secondaries include Eyeball Collection and Treasure Hunter. For quite some time, Duskblade had been the most popular mythic item for Kha'Zix, but there's a new 2-item core that is heavily outperforming now. Drop Duskblade and look to prioritize Ghostblade. The 2-item core of Umbral Glaive and Ghostblade is absolutely perfect for Kha'Zix and gives the champion an immense amount of snowball power. The passive from Ghostblade, providing you with bonus out-of-combat movement speed, allows you to motor around the map, while the passive from Umbral Glaive helps you clear out any wards so that your assassination potential is much higher. Being able to clear vision while maneuvering around the map at lightning speed are two factors that provide this build with so much raw carry power. As for the rune page, it's First Strike with Free Boots, Futures Market, and Cosmic Insight. Sudden Impact and Treasure Hunter are great for secondaries. Not only is Viego mid lane a super crazy off-meta pick, but the build leading to the best results is also much different than what we see in the jungle. Jungle Viego loves running Trinity Force, but this setup revolves around Iceborne Gauntlet for your mythic purchase. Blade of the Ruined King is the rush item, Kraken Slayer is second, and then you grab Iceborne Gauntlet third. This synergy between all 3 items in this build is really nice because you've got a solid amount of burst power from Blade and Kraken, while Iceborne Gauntlet gives you that needed tankiness and sticking power. As long as you're able to stick onto opponents, the consistent DPS with this build is incredible, so Iceborne Gauntlet slotting in third instead of something like Trinity Force works way better. The rune setup to run with this build is Conqueror with Triumph, Alacrity, and Last Stand, take Second Wind, and Overgrowth for secondaries. So there's been a new Azir build going around that actually makes the champion way easier to play. Instead of running a build with Nashers that is more heavily focused around weaving in auto attacks for maximum DPS, you are taking Lich Bane in its place. It's not Crown or Liandry's as the mythic item either, as you want to be picking up Ludens. So the 2-item core consists of Ludens and Lich Bane, which provides Azir with a lot of upfront damage and the ability to chunk really hard with that first Q into auto attack. Now, just to clear up any confusion, if you haven't read the patch notes recently, Azir soldiers now proc on hit effects at 50% effectiveness, so it's made Lich Bane a viable pickup, as you can now proc the Spellblade passive. The third item to round out the core build will be Shadow Flame, so you're getting a ton of one-shot potential coming out of this setup. There are 2 options for the Keystone rune when running this build. You can either go Comet or Hail of Blades. If you're in a melee matchup where you'll be able to poke the enemy out a lot, Hail of Blades is great value, but if you're in a ranged matchup that you will want to be keeping your distance against, Comet is superior. This next build isn't really brand new, but it has become a lot stronger in 13.24b, be, so we wanted to bring it to your attention. Trinity Force Corki is back, and by far the most optimal mythic item for him right now. For a while, poke builds with Ludens had been the most popular, but you should really never be building Ludens now if you're looking to get the most out of Corki. In 13.24b, Corki's base AD was buffed, which provides him with a much stronger spike upon completing Trinity Force. If you guys are unaware, both of Trinity Force's passives scale off base AD, so this kind of buff for Corki is absolutely huge for him and this build. The best 3-item core that you should be looking to run on Corki consists of Trinity Force into Manamune 2nd and Ravenous Hydra 3rd. Don't start the game off with a Tear. Doran's Blade is the optimal starting item, but you should be picking up Tear on your first base. In regards to the rune page, it's First Strike with Magical Footwear, Biscuits, and Cosmic Insight, followed by Bone Plating and Overgrowth for secondaries. Let's talk a little bit about the optimal setup for Hui right now, as many players are building him incorrectly. Rush item is either Ludens or Liandry's, and you should be interchanging between the two based on the enemy comp. Ludens is best into heavy squishy comps, while Liandry's should be purchased if the enemy team has 2 or more health stackers. The second item is where a lot of players are going wrong right now, as the majority are purchasing Shadow Flame, while Horizon Focus is heavily outperforming. Horizon Focus has a ton of value with Hui because he's very easily able to proc the Hypershot passive due to his long-range spells and CC. The 2-item core of Liandry's into Horizon Focus does look to be the most consistent right now. However, most players are building Ludens into Shadow Flame. As for the rune setup on Hui, Comet will be the most consistent for the majority of your games. First Strike is viable if you're playing in an easy melee matchup where you're able to proc the rune off cooldown, but otherwise, Comet has a ton of value. One of the most unique new setups that we've covered in a while consists of running Radiant Virtue on Zeri. To be clear, this is for bot lane Zeri, as the recent Radiant Virtue build we covered for Varus is for top lane. Now, you're not going to be rushing the Radiant Virtue though. Blade of the Ruined King is your first purchase, and you go into Radiant Virtue 2nd or 3rd. Hurricane will be the item you either pick up 2nd or 3rd, depending on where you want to slot Radiant Virtue. We do like Radiant in the 3rd slot a bit better for most games, just because you're going to be lacking quite a bit in the damage department for the mid game if you build it 2nd. So much of Zeri's strength comes from her ability to pop R and excel in teamfights, so the value you get out of Radiant Virtue is really good. Currently, this 3-item core is performing equally as well as the standard builds on Zeri, so it's definitely one of the more sleeper setups in the game right now. The rune page to run with this build is Lethal Tempo, followed by Triumph, Alacrity, and Last Stand, Grab Conditioning, and Overgrowth for secondaries. The Koreans have a new build they've been running on Draven, and it's a very upfront bursty setup. Trinity Force has been the most popular mythic for a long time now, but it's Ghostblade you'll be running in place of it. The Collector is purchased 2nd, and then it's Stormrazor to round out the core. Ghostblade in combination with Stormrazor offers so much damage with that first auto attack, while providing Draven with a ton of movement speed at the same time. The sheer mobility from this build is super nuts, and it allows Draven to space around and kite out dive champions really well. The rune page consists of Lethal Tempo with Presence of Mind, Bloodline, and Last Stand. Roll with Magical Footwear and Biscuits for secondaries. With Lucian buffed in 13.24, a lot of pros have been picking him back up in solo queue, and there's an interesting build that many pros are experimenting with. Kraken Slayer is by far the most popular rush item for Lucian, but a lot of pros are running Stormrazor instead. Stormrazor is actually outperforming Kraken Slayer on the analytical front, so it's looking like a very underrated pickup for Lucian. The items to follow after rushing Stormrazor are Navori Quick Blades and Rapid Fire Cannon. The Stormrazor with Fire Cannon combo works really nicely together later on to provide Lucian with some strong catch power. If he sees an enemy squishy caught out of position, dashing forward and chunking them out is really powerful with this build. Definitely look to try out this Stormrazor rush if you're playing into a comp that is more squishy. Into a full tank comp, Kraken Slayer makes way more sense, but Stormrazor is definitely being slept on in the correct spots. The rune page to run consists of Press the Attack with Presence of Mind, Bloodline, and Coup de Grace. Magical Footwear and Biscuits are the best secondaries. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skillcapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent Challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's going to be all for our latest update on builds that are on the rise in solo queue. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.